My name is Vanessa Joseph, and I humbly serve as the chairwoman of the Haitian-American Voter Empowerment Coalition, or HAV. As the daughter of Haitian immigrants, my love for Haitian culture goes well beyond the food, the music, and the language. Just like many of you, I am proud of Haiti's history. I am proud that we were the first independent Black nation, and I am proud that we were the first nation to abolish slavery. Certainly, this was not an easy feat, given that our ancestors came from different African tribes, but they genuinely believed that l'union fait la force, and they put aside their differences and focused on a singular essential right, freedom and liberty for all. Today, as a community, we must return to this mindset. We need l'union. Nous besoin l'union plus passer tout l'autre bagay jodi. Our shared interests must come before our differences. It is said that in politics, there can be no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, but only permanent interests. No matter what your party affiliation, your religious beliefs, where you come from, and where you live, we are calling upon you to join in this movement. For far too long, our votes have been fragmented and therefore diluted.
Hi, good afternoon.
Our votes have mattered, but they have not leveraged tangible results for the Haitian community. That is why I am proud to invite you to join the Haitian-American Voter Empowerment Coalition as we work together to carry this movement forward. HAV is the result of a consensus building amongst the myriad of local and national organizations and individuals determined to ensure that the Haitian
community
is informed, empowered, and engaged, and that the votes of the Haitian electorate are valued. There are many ways in which you can work with HAV, and we need community champions across the United States and abroad who can help to motivate Haitian American voters within your locality. But if you don't have much time to volunteer, then we urge you to consider making a contribution to HAV. Of course, politics are expensive, but if each of us makes a small sacrifice and financially contributes to the cause, we can make a significant impact on the upcoming elections and future elections. While we are living in very challenging times as a result of the pandemic, we cannot allow it to distract us from continuing to fight for the causes that matter to us most. After all, bay piti pashish, et me en pile chay balou. Change is always possible, but it is up to each generation, each and every single one of us to make it happen. I hope our generation does not only wish to change the status quo, but that we really work to make it happen. Our generational task now is to repeat our ancestors' footprints and their models. L'union fait la force. That being said, I invite you to visit our website at www.havcoalition.org to make your contribution or sign up to join this coalition, our coalition. I thank you so much for your consideration and your commitment to moving our community forward.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the second day of the NAAHP, or the National Alliance for the Advancement of Haitian Professionals, Haitian-American Candidate Symposium. In spite of all that we have been dealing with, we cannot neglect our civic duties. In fact, now more than ever, we have to stay informed and get engaged in the system if we ever really want to bring change. So with 2020 being a very important election year, it brings us so much joy to see our very own brothers and sisters on the ballots, and not only in Miami-Dade, but also in Broward. We had some Broward candidates yesterday. We had a Palm Beach candidate yesterday, and all over the United States. Let's together take advantage of this opportunity to get familiar with their platforms and what they seek to achieve on behalf of the Haitian American community. Please keep in mind that NAAHP does not endorse any candidates, but instead seeks only to provide a platform to inform the Haitian community. My name is Vanessa Joseph, and I am the moderator for today's panel. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon.
It's such a pleasure to see each of you. And as we move through the panel, I encourage you both to be mindful of the time when you're speaking, because I want to ensure that each of you has an opportunity to really fully answer the questions, and of course, leave some time to allow maybe the audience, if they have any questions, to ask their questions and also get an answer from the two of you. And hopefully Ketly Joachim is able to join us. She is not yet on the call, but when she does come in, we will have her introduce herself. So before we fully dive into this conversation, please briefly introduce yourself and tell us for which position that you are a candidate. We will, of course, start with ladies first, and that is Gypsy.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, NHP. Thank you, Haitian-American Voter Empowerment, for this opportunity. I am Gypsy Metallus, your candidate for Miami-Dade County Commission, District 3. I will get into the geography of District 3, hopefully, in a little bit. But I am an educator by training, a longtime community activist, community advocate, community servant. I moved from education to county government, and I ended up running SAMPLA, the Haitian Neighborhood Center, for the past 20 years. And so it is really this unique combination of not just service, but service in the specific areas of education, of of government and public administration, as well as in a nonprofit organization where you have a bird's eye view around everything that impacts individuals, communities. You understand the interactions or the interconnection or intersection between government, community, and services. And I believe that those areas have prepared me well to continue my service, to dare to wish to represent the community that we all care about so much.
All right, that was a great introduction. So, Mr. Bossous, if you would like to introduce yourself and tell us which position are you a candidate for?
Thank you. We've been having a little bit of technology difficulties, but I think that we're on now. You can hear me well?
Yes.
Excellent. I apologize. Thank you. Well, my name is George Bossous Jr., and I'm a psychotherapist by training. Graduated in 2003 from Bay University. I've been working in this community ever since. Prior from coming to Miami, I worked with a newspaper called the Earth Times. It was an environmental newspaper, and then we've circulated mostly at the United Nations, where I worked for 4 years at the UN. And after my graduation here from Barry, I started working in the field, and then in 2009, I created an organization called Word in Action that deals exclusively with child sexual abuse and human trafficking. And I've been working with the families, providing services, conferences, training all over the place, doing prevention. And then now currently I'm completing a doctorate degree from Ward University in public health, concentrating in epidemiology.
Wonderful. So as we lay a foundation for the rest of the conversation, I think it would be extremely helpful to our audience if you could please summarize what the role of each of these positions play within our larger political system.
Absolutely. I'm running as a state representative for the District 108. And as a state representative, wear many hats, but one of the key factors and jobs of a state representative is to basically vote on the budget for the entire state. And in voting on the budget, meaning also allocate money for different programs. And how you do that is through also appropriation, but also we create and voting laws, laws that regulate the entire state. And some of the laws, you look into it, making sure that they're in line with your community, and how they would benefit your community in many ways, whether it's financially, whether educationally, or at whatever level that is. And this is the key roles, but also a state representative also have other roles in accompanying the community that he serves in different ways. For example, you could accompany somebody who has some problem with immigrations, even if immigrations are at the federal level, but you also a voice representing them. You could also wait on your leverage in helping. So, in a sum, this is a sum of the roles, some of the key roles that a state representative would play in Tallahassee.
Thank you, Gypsy.
Certainly. And so the Miami-Dade County Commission is the local legislative and governing body that oversees the affairs and the assets of the county. And so it is the largest authority, if you will, the largest entity overseeing the 34 local municipalities. And so the county, of course, levies taxes, right? But it also it makes laws through resolutions and ordinances, and these laws impact zoning, impact transportation, impact public services, impact health and wellness, environmental protections, impact a number of quality of life issues, right? And so there are 13 members on this governing body.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gypsy. So, Mr. Bossous, you mentioned the appropriations process, right? You mentioned that appropriations is a way to get funds in the community. Can you explain what that process is actually like? How does one actually go about the appropriations process?
Well, there are many ways that goes, the appropriation process. Me personally, I have an organization where I went to Tallahassee and proposed some budget for certain projects. It goes from different projects. For example, you may have some projects related to, for example, education, and you might have an organizations already within your community that are already providing this project. So what you go, and then you look into the project, and then you propose it. When you propose that, is basically you propose a legislation, and then you will go on the floor and argue that legislation, making sure that there are monies. For example, you would request the funding if with that particular project, and of course, you're gonna make sure that you convince your colleagues and your argument, and making sure that you could get this into the budget. Once you get this into the budget, now it would go, if it voted from the House, it would go to the Senate. So once it's go to the Senate, you're also gonna put it on the floor, and then they would argue it as well. If the Senate approved it, now it would get into the budget, the budget for approved both by the Senate and the House. Now, it's not over yet. You would have to also submit it to the governor. Now it's gonna be up to the governor to actually veto that project or appropriate that money. So a lot of projects sometimes be submitted, and then once you reach the governor's desk, the governor could either veto that or say, you know what, I approve it. Now, what that approved, it becomes a law and it becomes part of the budget, and therefore the project would get the money allocated.
Interesting, interesting. You also mentioned immigration, and as an immigration attorney, obviously, I was immediately attracted to the idea of asking you a question related to immigration. And I know on your website it actually mentions, that you would fight for immigration. However, as you just mentioned, it actually is a federal issue. And so I'm wondering, when you say that you would be fighting for immigration, you would accompany people or service them in some way. What do you exactly mean by that?
There are many ways. Now, you have to understand that immigration laws, basically, it's at the federal government's level. Now, if somebody's going to tell you, okay, you don't have a visa, you're a TPS, or so on and so forth, somebody from the legislation board is going to make sure that happen. That's less likely. However, let's say, for example, you have one constituent who would probably meet, a lawyer or an immigration officer. Well, you could also either write to the immigration officer, you could accompany that constituent, you could argue on her behalf. For example, some of them don't even speak English. Sometimes they may have difficulties understanding the laws. You might help. Your office also could accompany them in helping them fill out their papers, making sure that they know they're aware of the laws, they're aware of how they could access to certain possibilities within the system. So your job is basically accompanying to that process, making sure that they have access to information, they have access to also different ways of being legalized in the community, or whether if they are legalized or not. So they might be illegal, but they may still have some level of problems with the immigration process. So your office could actually provide those services. So in terms of laws, it's going to be up to you also as a representative. There are so many things you could also do to govern as a community, to actually making sure that their voice are heard. You could even write to the State Department on behalf of your people and ask for certain laws to be modified. They ask for certain laws to be implemented. There are many ways you could use. You could do that as a state representative, because beyond the hat that you're wearing as a state representative, you're also a community leader. You're a leader. You're not going to stop fighting for your people. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to stop, being a voice for your people. Your job is to represent them. And you could even go to Washington and make sure that you ask to meet who and so, and actually bring their arguments forward. So there are many ways you could help. But in terms of making laws, in terms of the executive body to actually make certain decisions within the legislation related to immigration, this is at the level of the federal government.
Okay, I just want to also mention not to reference anyone as illegal, because as we know, human beings cannot be illegal, right?
Absolutely. We have to be honest sometimes. And then even, how the executive board, so sometimes in Washington and talking about like Florida as a hub. And then you have all this process and they try to send people out. You're talking about the dreamers and so on and so forth. All the arguments within the legislation. But what you want, you might find somebody who's from certain circumstances. Let's say that the person has some kind of persecution, political persecution in their, at home, and then they reach the shore of Miami. Well, you would find a way to help and legalize from that person from being illegal and to be legalized. So you could accompany that person also in the process in filing out, getting the information and work with the immigration department so that they become legalized in the country.
Okay, thank you. So Gypsy, now to you. You're running for a county seat, and it's a seat that I believe has never been held by a Haitian American. And so in fact, you'd probably be making history in this position. And we often hear the phrase representation matters. It's been thrown around a lot in the community. And well, what would it mean to the Haitian community in Miami-Dade County to have a Haitian American in office in District 3?
All right. And so thank you for the question, Vanessa. And let me just clarify for those who've joined us and the audience. In fact, we've had a Haitian American at the county commission level, a Haitian American male, right? That is Commissioner Jean-Maurice in District 2. So the district that I am seeking, you're correct, and that I would be the first Haitian American woman to exactly. And so it just to
the seat,
not in general. But you're right. You're right. Language matters. Language matters just as importantly as representation matters. And so just now we were talking about undocumented individuals. And so as we talk about members of our community and as well as people who come from parts of the ally community, it's important that we uphold their dignity, reflect their sense of self, their sense of empowerment, and their sense of belonging. And so we can speak of undocumented individuals because we know that our communities replete with them, right? So language matters, just as representation matters. Representation, and that, just as George was saying, it takes another Haitian American or Haitian immigrant or the child of Haitian immigrants to understand the plight of the undocumented individuals in our community. It takes an immigrant to understand the experiences and challenges of another immigrant, right? And so in that sense, representation matters. So it takes as someone who understands the meaning of Amway to reflect properly on what is being expressed by that one singular utterance, right? And so it matters not only because the person representing or reflecting the community's point of view understands its issues, understands its aspirations, understands its challenges, right? But also can speak about its interests, right? Can advance and promote its own interests. And so, in that sense, to be there to represent, it's an awesome task because you want to always reflect well on the community that you represent, whether it's your immediate constituency or the larger community, and as large as the diaspora, because as they point to a Haitian American who's elected to office, when you do good, it reflects well on all of us. And when you do bad, it also reflects badly on all of us. And so in that sense, representation is an important element, and both of us are seeking these offices. And it's an important responsibility. It's one to be taken very seriously because as we open our mouths, we represent the culture, we reflect the culture, right? And we speak on behalf of the culture, although sometimes we don't think we are, but we would be. So just as you said that you could potentially advocate for a set of policies that emanate from the federal government, but you in your role as a state legislator, you know that there are some things that you can do in support of your community. And so yes, representation matters. And I certainly hope that in this election cycle, like many other election cycles, that we understand the value and the power of representation.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy that, we got to loop in immigration again, right? Talking about some of the undocumented folks who are in our communities. And I recall going to a county commission meeting, the detainer issue came on, right? Where basically it was the conversation around, are we going to allow ICE hold in Miami-Dade County? Are we going to honor them? Are we going to be a 287G municipal or locality? And I wonder, where do you stand on the issue of immigration, right? How would that vote have gone to you?
Is this addressed to me?
That's
Oh,
to you.
I would have argued passionately against us playing into the federal government's hands in this way, for all the reasons that many advocates have proposed, right? From discouraging people and cooperating with police and having us not reflect the moral authority that we as a county commission made up of so many immigrants, right? Made up of so many immigrants. We would be abandoning our roots. We would be just turning our backs to our roots, to our origins, and we would just be. This would be a slap in the face. It was a slap in the face of the entire community of immigrants, right? And so those would be some of my arguments. And of course, I would very much think about the various moral and historical arguments that could be made to remind people of what it looks and feels like to collaborate with people who are not viewed in the best of light. And there are awful examples in history of collaboration when you thought it was convenient.
Right.
So again, those are part of the wonderful arguments that George suggested he'd be offering. And at times, you've got to sort of use every lever at your disposal to make a point.
Absolutely.
So if your leverage is historical, you do that. If your leverage is moral, you do that. And if your leverage is how it reflects on all of us as a community and how it betrays who we are as immigrants, that's a strong and powerful lever as well.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Bossous, I see that your slogan is breaking the cycle of division, injustice, and poverty. So when you talk about this cycle, what do you believe is the root cause of this cycle that you speak of, and exactly what you plan to do to break this cycle?
Okay. Again, I hear some statics. I don't know if it's from me or
It's
from
coming from you.
Oh, gosh, I don't know what's going on, but I'll do my best here. When I'm talking about breaking the cycle, and I have three pillars. when when I'm thinking about it. I'm talking about breaking the cycle of division, injustice, and poverty. These are DIP. Division, injustice, and poverty. And they're all interlinked. This is what I mean. Division, because I've been in this community for a long time. And I'm sure that Gypsy would agree with me. There are factions within our own community that we can less. Whereas, for example, I remember talking to some, elected officials, and you would hear that so and so is not talking to so and so for whatever reason. I could take myself as an example. I came from the left lane and filed and wants to become a state representative. Do you know some people would just give me cold shoulders and not even talking to me just because I said I want to be a state representative? This is the only argument. So what you realize here is, and just the same way as in Haiti, I lived in New York is the same, I went to Canada is the same. There is an element of division within our own community. And we need to make the bridge. We need to break that cycle. I believe this community could be way stronger. In talking about the numbers, we are the second after the Cuban throughout the entire state of Florida. Here in the district 108, we are very strong when it comes to numbers. We have a lot of organizations, we have a lot of great people, we have a lot of great leaders. But I believe that sometimes we work in a separate corner, whereas we could put our resources together, our strength together, and then develop an agenda for our community. So that division part is weakening us as a community. Injustice, when you look at the Haitian-American community, for example, I work as a psychotherapist, I work in families. When I go there, you could see the problems because I'm not only one, as a mental health, you do more than mental health. The socioeconomic is really huge. The disparity between our community and the other community is really large. The average income of a Haitian American, for example, black, in this community is about $25,000, whereas with the Hispanic it's 47 and with the white it's 60 something. So, and we have people who are capable of really raising the level and the way of life of this community. And that also linked to poverty, because if you have division and then you have injustice, when I say injustice, whether it's in terms of social services, for example, as a psychotherapist, we have major problem having different entities providing services. You have the Hispanics. You have, if you look at the school system, for example, you might find, for example, a school with 80% Haitians, but the leader of the principal may not be represented by a Haitian. Whereas we have Haitian professionals, we have Haitians that are well equipped to do that job. There's some level of injustice when it comes to it, whether it's socially and also within the legal system. When we look at the percentage of young kids being incarcerated in the juvenile justice system, they refer them to me all the time as a psychotherapist. It's a large number. Last time I checked, it was about 60%. So this is a crisis. So when you look at all these disparities, when you look at all those problems that also link with poverty, because if we strengthen our base, if we put our heads together, and Gypsy was talking about representation, understanding, our culture, understanding our needs, and defining our needs, this is when you're going to meet the problem, the socioeconomic problem of this community. That's why when I'm talking about breaking the cycle, I'm not talking about a group of people. I'm talking about those elements that I've realized has been hurting this community. And if I had a chance to be elected, I promise you I would work my heart to meet everybody and to make sure that we could work together. We could forget whatever. That's why even in this campaign, and people said, "Well, George, you have to be a little tough." I said, "No, I'm not gonna wage any personal attack. I'm not going to destroy Haitian-American. I can care less. My focus is this community. I want, at the end, after this election, I should be able, if I win, be able to call any of these my opponents, say, you know what, how can we work together? And if I lose, then I would call them and say, you know what, I am available to work with you. Because at the end, it's not about me, it's about this community. That's what I mean by breaking the cycle, is doing things differently. Have a different approach, have a different way of doing politics in this community.
So what exactly is your approach?
My approach is just what I just said. Breaking that cycle, my approach is just what I just said. In other words, being able to put people together, being able to reach out to people, being able to propose a vision and work on something together, define a common goal for a community with everybody, wherever you are, wherever your level, making sure that we could man our differences. We might disagree in policy, we might disagree in approach and how we go about it, but at the end of the day, our heart is in a good place. And we know that we want to represent a group of people that have been marginalized for a long time, that have been really hurt by a system that has been against them. Therefore, if we could do it, if we could forget ourselves for a minute and thinking community in a very sensible way, then we definitely could thrive. Because what I'm proposing is not something that new. Other communities have done, whether it's Jewish community, whether it's Cuban community, whether it's Puerto Rican community, they've done it. I think that we can too.
Thank you. And so, Gypsy, I think that, on your website, because I did my research before I actually got ready to prepare some questions for this, and I really looked at platforms, and it's important to look at platforms because that really tells us where this person stands on the issues. And of course, this is an opportunity to deep dive into your thoughts on a lot of these issues. I know that Safer Communities is a pillar that you are trying to put forward, that you are putting forward in terms of what you would like to see in the county. But when we also think about the economy, right? I think sometimes being able to give people jobs and give them access, right, to resources, we can help to minimize some of the other issues that cause us to believe that our communities may not be as safe as we would like them or as safe as they could be. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on what is your role? What would your role be in the economic development of the communities that you would be serving? And how would that translate to potentially having safer communities?
Excellent. So I view my role as one of advocate, as legislator, right? And as engager in chief, if I can say that, right? Engager in chief means that on a nonstop basis, I'm engaging with various sectors of the community so that people can tell me firsthand what their issues are, what the barriers are, what their problems are, and what their needs are. Because then I think being armed with that information, that helps me to craft legislation, policies, or initiatives, right? And so in terms of being that chief advocate, this is also where you are in a better position to argue in favor of initiatives or policy options that you're putting forward. Because if I say that I view crime as a symptom of lack of opportunity, I need to be able to break that down for people. I need to convince you of what that looks like, not just so that you understand, but to also be an accurate reflection of what's going on in so many vulnerable communities, right? And so if I say that if we make available more preventive programs, if we make available more jobs, summer jobs, internships, apprenticeship programs for youth, that could be a potential lever in reducing crime or in making communities safer, right? If I say that investing or creating more opportunities for small businesses to take part in this $9 billion enterprise, that's the county, right? If you argue for opportunities to expand opportunities, because you can again argue that the opportunities are afforded to Black and brown people in this community barely at 2%, right? So armed with those kinds of numbers, that kind of data, this kind of information, you are in a position to argue and favor of the kinds of policies and initiatives that you want to see. So for me, it's about, people talk about defunding the police, right? So for me, that means looking at how maybe we don't invest so heavily. We put all of our eggs in that police basket. Instead, I would want us to invest a little bit more in preventive services for kids, preventive services for community members, supportive services for community members, because I guarantee you that is going to have an impact in lowering the crime rates or in creating an atmosphere or a community that's safer. So I think that these are the ways in which we can innovate around expanding opportunity, making sure that more people can take part and the best that Miami-Dade County has to offer. So that would be one approach, right?
Mm-hmm. Great. And before I continue with my questions, I want to offer the audience an opportunity to ask questions of their own. So please, if you're watching us live, feel free to drop a question and we will ask the candidates on your behalf. So George, I know that you have advocated for affordable housing. And I would like to know how you envision making affordable housing a reality for the individuals who live within your district.
Well, thank you. I get the questions all the time. And I know why I get these questions, because we all know that has been a problem for many years. And I've been in this community since 1999. Not even one election that you don't find a candidate putting affordable housing as part of the platform. And when I was building my platform, the first question, George, you have to put affordable housing has been a problem, particularly for the Haitian-American, or particularly for the African-American as well. And what I realized is, and we have to be realistic, you go to Tallahassee as a state representative for 2 years. Both the House and the Senate, they are controlled by Republicans. Affordable housing, meaning putting money so you could help, whether it's Section 8 or some other programs where people could afford to pay their rent. Or you could put low costly housing so people be able to afford them. And I realized the problem. And I said, you know what, look, if I said I'm going to Tallahassee and then in 2 years you're going to fix that, I'll be lying, because those before me would have fixed it already. And I said, let's do something different. Okay, let us define a long-term plan. And that long-term plan would include everybody, every sectors, those that are involved within that sphere of work, and see how we can resolve this in the long run, because it's not something you're gonna go over. Because let's be frank, you're gonna put money aside and where people could afford the house, that's fine. That money would go away and then you're gonna go to the same problem again. You have a problem with jobs, for example. People cannot pay their houses because they don't have good paying jobs. Because even though they're paying their rent, but the little money that comes in is not enough to pay them. So now what can we do, and what we should do in addressing first, the high paying jobs problem, either through providing technical schools, either providing ways for people to go to college universities where they could have high paying jobs. But this is the long term. But in the short term, even though I would fight making sure that while I'm there, people could have access to funding, we could put appropriations in programs where you could do it, but I have to simultaneously think of how that should be solved once and for all, either by the long-term high-paying jobs, either by creating more possibilities for small businesses, either by creating access to certain services, financial services where people could get money, they could pay in their job. You have to rebuild this community. If you look at the community very well, for example, I'm looking at during the COVID-19, there are a lot of small businesses that closed, or there are some stimulus money there, but they couldn't have access to it. And a lot of times, it's pops and moms, little businesses where sometimes they don't have the structure of the businesses, they have the papers of the businesses, they try to thrive. But as a state representative, it's my job to accompany them, making sure that they build them, they have a business plan, they have a marketing plan, they have all the stuff. So when there are money, they could also bid and also get that money in. And like that, you're gonna create jobs, you're gonna create opportunities, and people are gonna be able to live decently in a good home. So we have to work hand to hand, both by thinking of the short terms and also the long term. Otherwise, I'm gonna go after 2 years. I'm gonna have affordable housing on the platform. Whereas whether it's affordable housing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, these are human rights. As a candidate, I shouldn't even have to have this on my platform. It should have been resolved. There are countries where that is resolved. Why can that be done here in our community, in this great country of America? So I think that I would work very hard across the aisle. I would work with everybody else. I would work with people who know better than me, who've been working in this for a long time. I would include them in the dialogue to come up with a solution to this long term.
All right, thank you. So, Gypsy, we know that money can come from the state for affordable housing, but the people who really get the job done in affordable housing are at the county level. And so I know that that is also a platform of yours, or a priority rather of yours. And so tell us a little bit more about what your vision is for affordable housing, specifically in Miami-Dade County, where we know a lot of folks, especially young people, right? They graduate college and they're forced to move. All my friends are moving to Atlanta right now. It's the business up there or Georgia rather, because they're able to afford much larger homes for the price. So please talk to us about your priority being affordable housing and how you envision executing that from the county.
Thank you, Vanessa. So we all know, or maybe the viewers don't know, that Miami-Dade County has an affordable housing emergency, right? You often hear that most people, the average Joe with the median income of maybe $47,000, is paying more than 30% of their income in housing, right? And so we know that that's not sustainable given the lower wages that our economy tends to generate. We also know that, you're right, Vanessa, millennials are having a hard time remaining here because if from the get-go they can't afford their housing, there's not too much keeping them here, right? And so most recently, Miami Homes for All, that's the name of the organization, after 2 years of labor-intensive meetings with a number of experts, created this affordable housing framework, right? So essentially, it's a great blueprint for what we ought to be doing in order to not only procure the 122,000 units that we need as we speak, that we need right now, right? But how we then create a mixture of public housing, affordable housing, micro units, home ownership opportunities, supportive housing, you name it, it's in the plan. And what's good about it's a blueprint for how the city, the county, the cities, the municipalities, and the state, as well as the federal government, can play a role in ensuring that we have the funding stream or the funding mechanism in place to make sure that affordable housing can be a reality. And I would urge George to make sure that he fights to keep those Sadowski funds, to keep those funds whole, to not allow the legislature, the Florida state legislature, to raid that fund, which is, by the way, a fund established strictly and solely to build affordable housing, right? And so what's happened in the past is that when the legislature has been short of funds, that was the go-to place in order to get money to pay for other things. So we must say, no, we cannot touch those funds, because in and of themselves, they're not sufficient to take care of our needs, right? And so that means that the county as a whole, no commissioner can afford to be parochial around affordable housing, because that's a need across the 13 districts. And if that's a reality in the county, that's a reality we have to tackle as a priority that we all buy into in order to not only provide or create the housing units where there's available land, and the county has to, maybe untie some ropes, if you will, to ensure that developers with a good track record of building affordable units, of building units of quality for our families, that they would be provided the opportunities to in fact produce these units, right? And if it means reducing fees, if it means faster permitting, there's a combination of things that can be done in addition to the local funding stream, the surtax dollars in particular, that could be made available to make this a reality for all of these people who are dying to become first-time homeowners, right? People who want to own a piece of this American dream that's increasingly becoming elusive. So again, it is a countywide priority. This deserves it deserves countywide attention, not just the attention of the 13 commissioners, but it also deserves the attention of the mayor, because we're only going to resolve this issue together. Because if the best and brightest that are born and raised here go away to school, cannot afford to return, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And if we're not making room for all of the workers in the various industries that are building and shoring up our economy, if we're not making room for those people, then we're going nowhere fast. And so this priority is urgent, and it needs to be dealt with the urgency that it deserves.
Thank you so much for that. So we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, HAVE, or Haitian-American Voters Empowerment, is a good initiative. However, is it just an organization that promotes candidates within the community, or an organization that is advocating for a better Haitian community? First of all, I think we have a wonderful Haitian community, right? We could always improve, but we're fantastic as we are. Mr. Bossous, can you mute yourself? Because there's a lot of static from you. And so just for everyone to know, Haitian-American Voters Empowerment Coalition is a nationwide coalition meant to mobilize the Haitian-American electorate across the United States, and even those who are abroad, but who are US citizens and are entitled or have a voter registration card. And so for sure, we want all of our votes counted. We don't want just the folks here. We don't want, just a group of us going out to vote for every election, but we want everyone to go out and make sure that their ballots are turned in so that we can really start to make the demands that we know that the Haitian community needs. And that's how we get a better Haitian community, right? That means that we all have to go out and vote. We have to support candidates that we believe in. We have to do so by either contributing to their campaigns or going out to volunteer for them. But whatever it is, we have to make sure that the Haitian electorate, every single Haitian American voter, is informed, empowered, and engaged to be able to cast their vote and really help to make a difference within the Haitian community. The second question is by the same person, and the question is, can Gypsy in detail explain the roles of it says country commissioner, but we know it's county commissioner, and also what impact will she have on policies such as immigration, more importantly, the TPS issue? And of course, Gypsy, you did talk about some of this, and we know that TPS is a federal issue, but I would love for you to talk about the sort of engagement that you've had on this issue in the past, and what you see that you can do to help move the mission forward, not just for TPS, but of course, comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you for the question, Evans. And so let me begin with the TPS, or the immigration part of your question. So again, the Miami-Dade County Commission does not have purview on immigration. Immigration is strictly a federal issue, right? And so that being said, as a county commissioner, I can, encourage my colleagues to join me in creating a resolution to be sent to Congress or to the president, urging them to act in a certain direction, right? So if it is to extend TPS, or to finally legalize, or to create a pathway for those individuals in our community who still hold TPS to create a pathway for them to become legal permanent residents, right? So the advocacy piece is one that a county commissioner, through their bully pulpit, right, through their engagement with community, they can certainly play an active role. I can decide, well, I'm going to join a delegation of immigration activists on a trip to Washington to sit and meet with senators and members of Congress who are trying to craft legislation to provide relief around this issue. That's one thing I can do, right? Or I can again continue to urge the federal legislative delegation members. I can urge them to act or to express or to reflect and represent what my constituents would be telling me that they need. And if my constituents tell me that they would love to have an opportunity to become legal permanent residents, then I'm going to find ways to argue that, to share that message, to promote that message in every way and every avenue that's made available to me as a county commissioner. I hope that helps to answer the question for events. Now, the second half, what does a county commissioner do? Well, your county commissioner is to a certain extent what your state legislator is to the state, what your senators and Congress members are to the congressional or federal level. Your county commissioner is more or less the same, right? The county commission legislates, right? The county commission passes or enacts policies that impact your quality of life. You know the saying, all politics are local. Well, your county commissioner is closer to you because they're right here in the county that you live, right? So you have more access to your county commissioner and to your municipal commissioners than you would to your state or your federal representatives, right? So it's zoning, it's quality of life, health, it's public safety, it is transportation, it is highways and expressways, the ways to help us navigate. It is overseeing the airport and the seaport. It is making sure that social services are funded adequately in order to help those who are more vulnerable. It is about providing affordable housing or housing opportunities. It is certainly about public safety. I mentioned that. And it is everything in between, because if a constituent contacts my office as county commissioner, whether it's an issue dealing with education, which, by the way, the county commission here has no purview over education, but that doesn't mean that I can't pick up the phone and communicate that concern to a member of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools Board, right? Or to the superintendent of schools. So while you, as a county commissioner, there's some things that are outside your purview, like immigration, like education, but you still have opportunities to convey the needs, the interests, and the concerns of your constituents to these individuals such that they can better be informed in their actions. I hope that answers for you, Events.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, we're almost at time, and we know that COVID-19 has affected all of our lives in just so many different ways. But of course, it's great to see that you've been able to push through even in these difficult times. And I'm certain that campaigning has changed, and I'm not even going to get into, your kitchen cabinet to talk about, how what campaign strategies you're using and how you're being creative in this time. But I do want to ask what you believe that we can do as a community to continue to inform, educate, and empower our voters to cast the right vote, or a vote, really. When I say right vote, what I really mean is vote for someone who's actually in their best interest in these upcoming elections. And how do we, make people see the importance of voting in every single election? So, Mr. Bossous, we'll start with you.
Thank you. It seems like that. Great. Okay. Well, one of the first thing is civic education. and let me see what I mean. It's very important for people to understand the importance of their vote. And that's why I've been talking about negotiating a vote. In other words, you should not vote blindly. You should not vote just, okay, I know George, and he's a nice guy, and I'm going to vote for him. That's not enough. Or I'm going to vote for George because simply he's Haitian. I'm going to put him to Tallahassee. That's not enough. And or I'm going to vote because Pastor so-and-so or this journalist so-and-so told me to vote this person. I'm going to vote. This is a mistake. I think that we should educate our people more about not only the importance of voting, but understanding the role of the person that's being elected. And also do a little bit of research. I understand we have a community where perhaps maybe technologically may not be so hype, especially, my grandma or my granddaddies and so on and so forth. But you have also community leaders, you have also directors of opinions that are also directing the way those people are thinking, the way they behave within the electoral process. I think we should make an effort and do some research and do some work. So when we cast our ballot, it will be an informed decision because the people that you're electing, they are going to make decisions that will affect your life, whether you're participating in the voting process or not. If you don't vote, somebody else is going to vote in your place. And if you don't exercise that right, for example, recently we celebrated the 100 years that allowing women to vote. People have died for this particular civic action. People are giving the blood for that. And I was in a panel talking about the voting right for women and African Americans and so on and so forth. This is the most important action you could pose as a citizen, as part of a community. Don't play with it. Don't let anybody play with that. Making sure that you vote your conscience. You vote for somebody you feel would truly represent you. Not represent himself or herself, but really the interests of the community. Somebody selfless and that could really unite people around. And this is, I think, is very crucial, particularly in our community, because I learned so much during that electoral process. I could write a book, and I said to myself, God, George, why you get yourself into? But it's a beautiful process. I learned a lot, and I hope what I've learned, I could share it to the rest of the community.
Thank you. Gypsy?
So I would encourage everyone to go out and vote. And if you have the opportunity to vote early because you've got early voting in your communities, please take advantage of that, in particular in light of COVID. So in order to be safe, you vote early without crowds. That's the best thing you can do. But I also want you to remember that in voting, you're making a powerful statement because after all, elections are they are science, right? And they are data scientists who are sitting back and looking at the numbers of who voted, what zip codes they're in, what's their demographic profile, what's their ethnic profile, and so they can better understand who's voting, what communities these people hail from, and what parts of the geography they happen to be from. Right? So that voting is our power, just as census is our power. Right? So you want to go out there and vote, and you also want to complete your census because for me, I know Vanessa agrees, the two go together.
Yep.
The two go together. And you especially want to vote for someone you know, someone you trust, someone you know can represent your interest, someone you know is going to be your servant, someone you know will advance the community's well-being, right? And someone who's into this for the sake of service. And I know that as I say that, viewers will say, well, yeah, you are. You're doing this for yourself too, but you don't go through this without first and foremost wanting to serve. Where you do it for yourself is maybe because you want to demonstrate the kind of impactful leader that you can be. You want to demonstrate your ability to work across, across partisanship, across interest, etc. You want to demonstrate your ability to build and forge relationships. You want to forge your ability, you want to demonstrate your ability to go out there and get things done for your community. So yes, those things are for you. But before they are for you, you've got to be about serving people. And you have to have a history that demonstrates that you have done that. And so I would urge you to vote for people you know will represent your interests well. Thank you.
Awesome. So I do want to say that we are at time, but I want to mention a follow-up from Evans. Evans Joseph said, "Thank you for your answer. You sound very committed, and I hope you get a It's a very kind thing." So Gypsy, I'll let you say your final words, and after that, George, you'll go next, and then I will close.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank NHP. I want to thank you, Vanessa, for serving as moderator. Our own Vanessa Joseph, clerk of the city of North Miami. Very proud of you, and very proud of the Haitian-American voter empowerment, because those are the kinds of building blocks that we ought to be about, creating in our own communities to ensure that we can work on the divisions that George speaks of, but that as we work on those, we're also building. Our communities need to be flying the plane as we're building it, right? Because there's that much catching up to be done. And so I would urge those of you who are watching us tonight to support in all ways and in any way you can. If it's easier for you to support us financially, we're going to drop our contacts in the chat so that you can be aware. And if you live close by, or if you live here and you want to offer yourself as a volunteer, that's always welcomed as well. But beyond that, I would urge you to remain committed and active in your own community's civic life. Each of us are the ones we're waiting for, right? If there are challenges to be addressed in our communities, don't wait for someone to come fix it. You're it. We're it, right? So we need to each do our part, do what we can do, and as part of this relay race of making our communities better, of having us continuing to make progress, and to finally achieve the dreams that our parents and our people who've come before us have held for us in this new country and this new community of ours. So I look forward to your support, and I thank you for having participated with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Gypsy. George?
Thank you so much. And AHP, and thank you, Gypsy. Very eloquent. I salute you. Well, I would say to please, just the same way that I've been telling anybody who's been supporting me, been encouraging me to get into that race prior from even thinking about getting into that. Don't just elect me and send me to Bossous. Let's go with me. Let's go with me, and together we could change our community. I know that there is no way, whatever I propose, I could do it alone. We cannot evolve in a vacuum. But I believe in the strength of this community. I believe we could do this together. That's why I was a campaign the way I did. That's why I stay positive within the limit of the records. But I know if we, particularly Haitian Americans, when we put our heads together, we've done that throughout our entire history. If we put our heads together, we forget ourselves for a minute, and then we think of community, we will shock the world. We will change this community. And I guarantee you, we will have an incident to our own motherland, where we were born before we came to the United States. That's why my campaign is just not a campaign. It's a movement that will continue after the campaign. I will work with the community leaders. I will continue my job regardless of the outcome of this campaign. Because what I hope is this mission, this vision to break the cycle of division, injustice, and poverty in this community. If you want to help, you could call me at 305-647-8973. My website is just right here, posted. The punch number is 54. I welcome all the encouragement, whether financial, whether from your simple advice, whether is volunteering, you sharing your cars to help, however you can help. Let's do it together. And I assure you, you will see a strengthening community. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. So before I close, I most definitely want to remind you all of you, I want to remind you all to complete your census. It is critical to our communities and is very simple to do by visiting my2020census.gov. We need to make sure we have representation in our communities. We need to make sure that we have funding in our communities, resources. And so please, 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 my2020census.gov. I want to say a big thank you to the candidates for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us here. I know that campaigning has not gotten easier thanks to COVID, but I do hope that you all are making sure to take care of yourselves and stay safe. Another big thank you to our media partners who help support this event. Of course, Chocarella, home team, PG Mix, and Golden V Inc. And of course, thank you to each and every single one of you who took the time out to attend this event and inform yourself of these candidates' platforms and what they stand for. I want to remind you that early voting is underway in Florida and specifically in Miami-Dade County. And so since both of these candidates are on the ballot, you can actually start in early voting. But if you haven't, if you haven't already submitted your absentee or vote by mail ballot, please do so as soon as possible. And of course, I want to encourage all of you, right, to pick your favorite candidates, whoever they are, and support them by donating or volunteering your time to their campaigns. I've knocked on doors before. I love it. That's probably my favorite activity. We can't do it now, so it's a lot of no-knock lit drops. But there's so much that you can do to help your favorite candidate get elected. And of course, no amount of money is too small. Every single dollar that goes to a campaign for a candidate counts, and it's valued so highly. So, if you have $50, wonderful. 500, great. 1,000, even better. But if all you've got is $1, hey, send it their way. And thank you all again for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you all back here again on Thursday, August 13th at 6:30, same time, same place. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.